Welcome, everyone. I'm Peter Horbiger with Brightmetrics. I'm joined here by Brad Cleveland, who is really the main event of this show. I'm just here as an MC today. I'm really excited to perhaps introduce to some of you Brad, though he is well known in the contact center space. So some of you might be familiar with him already. But Brad, thanks so much for joining us today. I would love to just kick off by having you, in your own words, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, how you got to be a well-known expert in the contact center space with a couple of books published on the topic and so forth. We're big fans of your work here, so we'll love for you to just tell our audience who you are and how we got to talking.
Oh, thanks so much, Peter. I appreciate that, and it's really great to be with you and be a part of this discussion. In my early years, I worked in various tech and customer service roles, and I especially enjoyed contact centers, even, back in the day. And I began studying them and writing about them, even as I worked in them, as kind of blundering my way along. And fast forward some years, I became a founding partner in the International Customer Management Institute, or ICMI. I served as CEO there for quite a few years, and we would grow to a point where we were training and consulting in over 40 countries. And the thing that unexpectedly opened so many doors for me is that I wrote a book called Call Center Management on Fast Forward back in the mid-90s. It came out in 97. It's now in its fourth edition. It's called Contact Center. That's it. Contact Center Management on Fast Forward. That opened so many doors. It just kind of blew away our expectations, which was wonderful. And I had the chance to work with Apple and USAA and University of California and governments in various parts of the world. And I've been so grateful to see firsthand the practices that build brands and loyalty over the long term, and to see the things we can do to undermine goodwill. So even as we were providing educational services and consulting, I've been learning every step of the way, and just feel so privileged to see what others are doing and how these things play out. And I'm still, every day I learn something. It's just such a fascinating industry, and I'm more excited about contact centers today than ever.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, no, we feel the same way. In some ways, parallels to our own journey in getting into this space, and in some ways very different. You've been at this a lot longer than we have, but I have read, I think, the fourth edition of Contact Center Management on Fast Forward, and there's just a treasure trove of insights in it that just got my wheels turning about things that we can provide to our customers. And also just as a great kind of primer, we actually discovered your book because we had someone join our team that knew nothing about contact centers, and they kind of a self-starter went and found your book and said, "Hey, this book's amazing. It's taught me so much about contact centers. It's becoming a part of standard curriculum for employees of Brightmetrics at this point." So, Brad, I've got a bunch of questions to kind of run through with you today. We're obviously focused on kind of a small slice of the contact center pie, being data analytics for contact centers and a BI platform kind of surrounding that. So I really want to hone in and kind of mine your brain for your expertise around analytics and metrics. And this is a space that we continue to feel like we're learning as well. There's so much kind of rapid change in the area of metrics and KPIs, and how to do this stuff well, how to make sure that we're optimizing for customer experience and agent productivity and other things. So the space of analytics and metrics has infinitely grown over the last 10 years. There are dozens, hundreds of potential metrics. How do you advise organizations narrow that kind of broad pool down to the ones that matter the most?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And metrics are so important, as you know, Peter, and the work you guys are doing is so important. But you could cover a small parking lot if you printed out the reports that a lot of contact centers are trying to follow. And there's so much good stuff there. What do we look at? Our teams can begin to glaze over, like, what is important. So having that ability to focus on the right things is so important. The good news is we found there are seven aspects of service delivery that if you pay attention to, they build on each other. They form a very effective framework for identifying the metrics that make sense. So they can bring you back to center point and really kind of help work through a lot of what could be distractions. So there are four foundational categories and three that are more strategic, and they're pretty easy to remember. So the first is workload forecast. What's coming in the door tomorrow and next week and next month and next year, depending on how far out you want to look. And I sometimes get puzzled looks when I mention forecasting, like, that sounds so operational. But try to manage an environment where you don't have a good read on the work you're to be stepping into. It's really tough. So forecast accuracy is a great metric. Variance of forecast to actual. How's that going? You get as specific as you need. How many customers are going to need help with homeowners policies Saturday morning? The second area then, and this is going to be no surprise, is the resources we need to handle that forecast, people and technology. If you have a good handle on the workload, you can build accurate plans and ensure you've got the right people and supporting resources, technology and otherwise to be available at the right time. So a supporting metric there might be variance of actual to planned schedules. Do you have the right skill sets in place at the right time? Number three then of the seven is accessibility. And that just refers to customer wait times. Can they get through and reach the resources they need? So accessibility is really just an outcome of the first two. How accurate were we on the workload, and how accurate were we on matching that workload with the resources that we need? And that's going to lead to accessibility. The supporting metrics here are in the contact center world: service level for work that needs to be handled as it occurs, and response time for work that we can defer to a later time if need be. And the number four is quality. So the first three are just the ticket to the game. Now, what actually happens during those interactions? And criteria can include things like understanding the customer's need. Do we resolve the issue? Are we capturing needed data, useful information, and so forth? So from a metric standpoint, we need quality scores ideally from samples of service interactions. And it's also great to have customer input. How do they feel things went? Did we resolve the issue from their standpoint? So those first four I think of as foundational. Those are, that's the blocking and tackling.
It's always interesting to me. A lot of people that we talk to are already doing this sort of thing or looking for this sort of thing somewhat instinctually, but they don't necessarily have the nomenclature for it. A lot of people, think of forecasting as this very expensive, laborious, kind of scientific process to figure out. But in truth, a lot of people look at already in contact centers interval reports for the past 4 weeks, broken out by half hour or hour, and are using that to kind of guess at what's it going to look like next week. And so it's always interesting to me when some of these terms can be really, really scary, but there's a kind of a gut level instinct that I find in a lot of people where they understand, I need to know what it looks like out ahead. Now that can be a complex forecast, Erlang C or something in that range sort of calculation, or that can just be a, general kind of looking at the history and working forward. But I always kind of say when people get started is I always want to read around it. Well, what's in your gut right now? Like you're looking at your contact center, you're clearly looking at metrics because something is broken. What does your gut tell you is the problem? And then work backwards from that to try to find the metrics that can support that, and an improvement might actually change the outcome there. So
That's
absolutely.
great
Those
advice.
first four make a ton of sense to me for sure.
Yeah, and that's great advice, Peter. I mean, trust your instincts. And I'll hear new managers say, look, I'm here because I had some wins elsewhere. I was able to turn around the such and such department, or we worked through this or that. So they're like, go figure out the contact center. It's variable, it's dynamic. If things don't go well, we get, pushback and get negative publicity. Go figure it out. So between you and me, I'm kind of new here. And I have the same advice. Trust your instincts. I mean, obviously go and learn what you can and what you need to, but trust your instincts. You're gonna have a pretty good sense of where you need to take things. So those first four foundational categories of metrics then help produce the next three, which are more strategic. And I bet there's no surprise here, but number 5 is employee engagement. And by engagement, I mean the degree to which your employees are committed to your mission and the work that you do. And studies resoundingly show, and we've all seen them, and all see this play out firsthand, that engaged employees provide better service. And you can measure engagement through employee surveys and certainly things like retention. Number 6 is customer satisfaction. Customer satisfaction has the greatest value when correlated with changes you're making. So how do changes in policies and products and services, that sort of thing, how do those things impact customer satisfaction? You can use one of the robust methodologies, Net Promoter Score, Customer Effort Score, something along those lines, to go beyond just plain vanilla customer satisfaction scores if you'd like. The advantage is they provide a standardized baseline for benchmarking, but something that gives you a real good read on customer satisfaction is what you're looking for. And then number 7 is strategic value. A high level, high value opportunity in contact centers is strategic. What do we learn in handling these interactions that can be helpful to the broader organization in improving products and services and processes? Customers are so over surveyed, and we're trying to get a read on where they want to take things and how things are resonating with them. But these are real live interactions we're having in contact centers, and we learn so much that can feed research and development and innovation. So the contact center is such a powerful set of eyes and ears if we harness that opportunity. An example I often cite and this is a simple example, is a consumer products company that we worked with that, Phil, and I use them because they're consumer products. So like, hey, we have commodities. There's not much we could add in terms of value with customer service. You can buy the sorts of things we produce from a whole bunch of other providers. So service is a matter of keeping costs down, right? Well, their contact center team began to track contact drivers by type. And, they found that 11% of the contacts they were getting on one of their popular spray cleaning products was because the cap was hard to remove. So you'd buy it and take it home, and all too often you'd shear off the spray nozzle. So most people throw it away, don't buy that brand again. Thank goodness that low single percent number of customers that contacted them and say, hey, I can't even use this now. So they took that information out to their packaging supplier, who redesigned the cap, and those contacts went away. And they're like, whoa, what else can we do here? Fast forward to today, they're working with marketing and IT and other areas. They inspired a new product line based on what they were hearing from customers. So yes, even if you have commodities, service is a differentiator if you harness it that way. If they can do it, anybody can. Here's my advice. Take inventory of these 7 areas. Are you missing any? Having this palette of metrics encourages focus in the right areas, and is going to lead to a lot more consistency and strengthen your services. And then you can drill down. I mean, the sorts of capabilities that you and your team, Peter, are bringing to the market. You can drill down into any of these areas, and you get excited about, hey, let's really figure out what's happening here. What are the drivers? But these 7 areas will keep you coming back to the things that you need to stay focused on.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's such a concise way to think about metrics. There's 2 areas in those last 3 that I wanted to touch on a little bit. I love your points about strategic value, purely because I feel like, to a lot of people, contact center is kind of a dirty word, where most people as consumers can think of really poor contact center experiences that they've had, calling their usually cell phone provider or internet provider or something like that. And so I tongue in cheek talk to people all the time who don't know what I do. They're like, well, what do you do? I'm like, well, do you have a war story, calling your cell phone provider? And almost everybody says like, oh my gosh, yes. I'm like, yeah, we help with that. But I kind of hate that in the same stroke, because, to your point of strategic value, contact centers can be such a source of meaning and life to an organization. And I think sometimes people working in contact centers even forget that, where they're like, oh yeah, people don't want to call us. And that's not true. I've had great contact center experiences where I walk away and say, hey, that was delightful. I don't regret that 5 minutes of my day or 15 minutes of my day at all. That person helped me a ton and they were great. So and even just going a step further to that and thinking about the broader kind of strategic value, I think that's such a great point. On the side of employee engagement, I wanted to hit there. Something I've been chewing on, I don't know, the last year and a half, kind of coming out of COVID, and we saw the great resignation. And I know contact centers were dealing with lots of turnover. And I think it's really linked, but I've been chewing on this idea of not just employee engagement, but employee satisfaction. And I think that in some ways that's just a retread of employee engagement, but those two things work in tandem. An engaged employee is usually a satisfied employee, and a satisfied employee is more likely to stick around within the organization.
Well, employee satisfaction and engagement they can really be two different things if we look at the degree of emotional commitment. And that's what I always think of. And the psychology world has a whole bunch of criteria, but how emotionally committed is someone to the work that we do? And the thing that we see over and over is it goes back to purpose. Do I feel like I'm making a difference? So if I know we're taking what I do and the help I'm providing individual customers, and we're learning from that, we're improving products and services and processes across the board, then hey, I helped some number of dozens of people today. That's great. Way beyond that, I'm helping capture that sort of direction that really is strategic, and it's going to impact all kinds of customers, future potential. I'm making a way bigger difference than just that work I'm handling today. So using what we're doing and showing your employees how you're using, what the work they're doing and the information they're capturing is so valuable. Really goes to the heart of purpose.
You've broken this down into 7 categories, really, really simple. Let's say we're talking to an organization who, really has no metric strategy at all. I feel like 7 categories could be a little daunting to get up and running. And we always talk to people about, hey, when you're picking metrics, don't try to look at everything. Start with a handful and work your way up from there. And we talk about metrics like something to try. Try to see if you can make a meaningful impact on this metric and see what the outcome of that is. And if after a month or a quarter, depending on what the nature of the metric is, there's no meaningful change, move on to a different metric. See if something else can kind of be the lever to pull on. So for somebody that's brand new in this whole metrics conversation, if you were going to pick maybe just 1 or 2 of those areas or something like that, where would you tell someone, hey, this is probably the highest value thing that you could get started with, and then start to layer in the rest over time?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a fun one too. We could probably debate it until the cows come home. Get a handle on your work. You got to know the work you're going to handle. So how much is it? How much of it is there? What's the nature of that work? What kinds of contacts you're getting? Go get a good handle on that. You don't have to produce a perfect forecast. No one's expecting that. No one does, but get as close as you can. And how's the quality aspect of it going? Like, are we really getting to the bottom of these issues that are coming our way? Because they're more complex all the time. We do have AI tools and all kinds of self-serve capabilities and things that we're doing to ideally mitigate work that doesn't need to happen, automate where we can. So that's left is more emotionally sensitive. It's more complex. It's higher value. So how are we doing from a quality standpoint in handling that work? Focus on those 2 things. And I think a lot of things will begin to fall into place.
Awesome. So great. Thanks, Brad. Next question. Your 6th point or 6th category was customer satisfaction. I think customer satisfaction, if there's one thing that is kind of perpetually top of mind for contact center leaders, it's customer satisfaction. What are you seeing in terms of, trends for how to measure and improve it? Is it, the same things that we've been looking at for a while? Are there new kind of schools of thought about how to measure that well?
Yeah, that's such an important question. And I'm seeing a lot of organizations that could kind of rethink this whole area. So as much as we've all talked about it, there are some things that we need to do yet. I would suggest there are 4 telltale aspects of an effective approach. And one is you've got to be in the game. You've got to serve customers where they are and measure what's happening where they are. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. I facilitated a meeting for executives of an HR services company, a large company that they've been successful, but they were getting increasingly negative publicity. They're like, what's going on here? And so we had this meeting to try to get to the bottom of some things. And someone brought up social media, and my laptop's beaming to a screen at the front of the room. So I toggle their Facebook page and I hear this gasp alongside marketing messages from the company. A frustrated customer had posted repeatedly about a password reset problem. I'm locked out. He's typing in all caps, clearly frustrated. We toggled over to Twitter and Instagram and other platforms. Same thing. Dozens of customers are bantering about their poor experiences. And the company was seemingly oblivious. They're posting messages about next Saturday's fun run. So get in the game, serve customers where they are. Secondly, and closely related, is cast a wide net of listening. Surveys are still important, but that's not the only way, and can't be the only way we get a read on what's happening. So listen, follow to the sentiment in social media. There's some great tools for pulling that in and making that easy. Operational data, quality and transfers and wait times, what's happening there. By all means, what are customers saying during conversations? Have a way to capture that. What are your employees saying? They know, they can tell you, off the top of their head what's happening in a lot of cases. So cast a wide net. Third, it's fine to establish one overall metric, net promoter score, customer sat or customer effort, whatever. Just know that's not going to tell you everything. So don't count on that to be the final source of your read on customer satisfaction. We need these other sources. And then fourth is take action. I've seen companies spend millions on voice of the customer programs. They pull in all this data and report some more on customer satisfaction for whatever it means, but then not act on what they're learning and where they can make improvement. And that's what we're really after, right? We want to move the world forward a bit. So showing our team, hey, here's what we're hearing. Here's where we're making improvements. That's powerful. We want a culture of action, of innovation and improvement, ultimately. So, I feel pretty strongly about that question. We've got to act on what we're learning and make sure we're casting a wide net, really learning what we need to learn about customer sat.
For sure. Yeah, I tend to think about customer satisfaction as a mix of leading and lagging indicators, where CSAT is typically more of a lagging indicator. You're getting a response post-call. Sometimes that's delayed depending on what kind of channel we're talking about. And also, you can get some bias in there. Sometimes people with only strong emotions are going to respond to that, and you kind of miss the middle. And so CSAT's great, not at all beating up on it. I think there's a ton of value to it, and it's very important. But to your point, there's a much broader picture, and there's a lot of more leading indicators that, depending on the sophistication of the technology you're using, can even be monitored in real time. But things like, it feels like such an age-old standard contact center metric, but abandon rate can tell you so much about your customer satisfaction by just digging in and comparing abandon rate to wait time and kind of seeing where the deltas and the breakpoints. And there's things that you can do to impact that don't at all involve staffing. You can play around with, announcements in queue and things like that that'll make a dramatic shift in effect on the experience. And those are the kinds of things that CSAT surveys don't always surface for you. Someone's not going to have the wherewithal to tell you in a CSAT survey that, if you just told me that the wait time was 5 minutes, I would be so much happier. Nobody's going to tell you that. You have to derive that out of the data. So we tend to think of it in those kinds of spheres of, the upfront kind of, whether real time or very quickly post call sort of metrics like abandon rate and wait time and transfer rate and those kinds of things. And then you've got more of your kind of lagging aggregate metrics from CSAT or NPS or whatever version of those kinds of calculations you're using.
Yeah, that's good advice. And you make a really important point. It's not just what a metric is, but correlated to others. And that's where having the ease of going in and being able to do that is so helpful. But correlate abandonment to, as you say, wait times, announcements, different criteria that would lead to different results, and you just learn a ton. You're really putting yourself in your customer's shoes when you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've got customer satisfaction. If I had to kind of break down what we talk to people day in and day out about, there's two pillars: customer satisfaction, agent productivity. So let's turn towards agent productivity. Well, how do you define agent productivity? And what are the main drivers that you see towards agent productivity today?
Yeah, I can tell you what it's not, and that's how many contacts someone handles. And let me explain
Absolutely. Yeah.
explain what I mean a little bit by that. So, in fact, a real world example comes to mind. We worked with a contact center a while back, and the director was concerned about the productivity of one of her agents who, she's telling me she's experienced, she's been here for a long time, she's capable, she's just not producing as much, she has a lower first contact resolution. I'm just concerned, what do we do about it? Well, come to find out, that person, the agent, was handling the toughest customer issues, which her peers were happy to transfer to her. And yeah, they took some time, and yeah, first contact resolution wasn't as high, but she was the one who once and for all was wrestling these issues to the ground and helping these customers get off a high center. So it's a great organization. The director realized, hey, we need to revamp our views on productivity clearly. True productivity is advancing the mission of the organization. We can't take our eyes off of that, and don't get sidetracked by lots of distractions. Historically, many managers did believe that productivity was how many contacts you handled, but we've got to remember our agents can't control arrival rates or contact types or customer communication abilities or how accurate our planning was. These are all things the late quality guru, Dr. W. Edwards Deming, would refer to as the system of causes. These are things outside of an individual's control. They're important for us overall, absolutely. Just don't set standards and don't think of them as productivity measures for individuals. So if using call counts or average handling time is another one is problematic, and they are, what's the alternative? And our answer always goes back to the two things that matter the most. Am I in the right place at the right time? I can't control what's coming at me. I can't control how accurate our forecast is. It's the luck of the draw who the next customer is. But am I in the right place at the right time? I can control that. I can manage that. And then the quality issue. Am I doing a good job? Am I taking the right approach with the work that comes my way? And between the two, they make a powerful pair. Now we've got to manage them right. We've got to really show some true leadership here with both of these issues. Adherence to schedule, the contact center term for, am I in the right place at the right time? It doesn't work if we try to manage it from a top-down approach. None of us want that or like that, and we're going to react negatively to that. But a culture where we all understand the importance of timing and how we impact customers and our peers, that's a different thing altogether. It's a cultural value that will work for us. And in terms of quality criteria, we need to know, what does it mean to do a great job with this? We need criteria that equate to the routine a pilot would go through in handling a flight, or the variables that play out in split seconds that athletes use in the course of a game. So we need criteria that we all understand, that helps us manage the million and one variables that come our way. Keep your eye on those two, and you'll be on the right track.
On the topic of, in the right place, right time, or I think what a lot of people would call adherence, I feel like scheduling and adherence is becoming a commodity in the kind of cloud contact center space. A lot of those big players are just rolling that into their solution. Now, granted, that sometimes comes at a higher licensing level or something like that. But we run into a lot of contact centers that haven't necessarily made the jump into full blown scheduling and forecasting tools. They're still kind of evolving towards that. And again, I think in the next couple of years, that's just going to become a moot point because everyone's going to be doing it. But for someone today that maybe doesn't have those advanced tools yet, doesn't have the budget to bring them in, how do you recommend trying to measure right place at the right time without that sort of advanced wrapper on it? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Some of the more advanced tools can get one in trouble because you can measure adherence to schedule down to the second. You have all these exception reports, and before you know it, you're kind of coming across as Big Brother, and no one loves that. It can be kind of top down. So I'm not suggesting don't have all the tools you can get your hands on. That's great. Just any of these capabilities we need to manage and really lead effectively. These are cultural issues. So I mean, just having a basic set of reports around, did we have the resources we need at the right time, and training, really educating everyone on the power of one. It's often referred to the impact of each person in a queue sort of environment. It's way more than any of us may realize. So showing some data so every person understands just from a cultural standpoint, the impact they have is huge. So I think some basic tools are fine. Again, I'd want more advanced tools, but you still have to use them judiciously and make sure they're building and not eroding your culture.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. I think there's rudimentary metrics available around agent behavior, regardless of whether or not you have a full blown scheduling and forecasting tool. Things like just total login time or maybe total on queue time. Again, I'm using generic terms. All of this stuff shifts depending on what platform you use, but looking at things like total login time or total time in not responding, which usually indicates you're missing conversations. Those kinds of things can just illuminate where there's potentially gaps and where you need to train your organization, I feel like.
Yeah. I was with a printer company a while back. We still print things, come to find out, still have to print things now and then, but they do a great job of supporting their customers and their, sometimes there's drivers issues and all the compatibility with all these devices and everything. So I'm sitting next to one of their tech support agents and well, he was great. And it was one of those complex situations that it took over an hour, and it wasn't usual, but it's just one of those, it took some time. And he's got his headset on, he's closing, he knew cold what to do. Has his eyes closed. He's leaning up against the cubicle. And I'm double jacked listening to all this. And he finally got this done. The customer's like, "Thank you. I will tell everyone about this experience. I mean, I will never buy another brand, yada, yada." And it was just one of those, great contacts. But he's like, I missed my break. We just blew right through my schedule. And so we definitely need, we need to know that we've got to have that latitude, and that just any rote report on, was I here at this time and was I there at that time? It's really, again, a cultural thing. We've got to make sure we know what we're looking at when we look at this data.
Yeah, for sure. We were actually just looking at some data in our platform with a customer where almost the exact same scenario where if an agent's missing their break, it will start throwing exceptions every time they take a call during what should be their break. And so the system was flagging exception after exception after exception. Now, I don't know the context. I don't know the agent. I wasn't sitting there in the room, but I can work into my head that, hey, maybe this is just, the Good Samaritan agent that's like, look, there's 15 contacts in queue and a couple other people are on break. I'm going to wait and I'm going to help out right now. But they're getting dinged time after time after time for each call. And to me, there's just, breaks are important and legally mandated and all that kind of stuff. But there are times when missing your break is actually a benefit to the organization and not something that should be a negative against that particular agent. They might just be doing the right thing in that moment. And that's really important, I think. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of doing the right thing, you're kind of adherence one side there, quality the other side. how do you see organizations defining and measuring quality or doing the right things these days?
Well, quality, and I always have to remind myself of this. When we talk quality, that's simply the attributes of a product or service. So there's good quality, there's bad quality. We need a point of reference. So we need quality standards, and standards refer to the requirements, guidelines, characteristics we establish for customer service, and they should reflect ideally what we want to have happen across any of these customer service interactions. So what we're seeing in the most successful organizations is first and foremost, their quality standards flow from their vision and mission. That may sound kind of fluffy, but if you see it play out, and Disney always comes to mind, running a theme park is inordinately difficult. There's a million and one things that can go wrong at any given time. So when Disneyland was created in 1955, they describe their vision as we create happiness. Try to write standards around that. That's a pretty lofty vision, but then they came up with 5 standards. They're still at work today, and they're just 5 words: safety, courtesy, inclusion, show, and efficiency. I think I got them right. And then they build out criteria underneath each. So under show, for example, are the actions: I stay in character, I keep my areas show ready. And then they describe the behaviors that support them. So you aren't going to find gum wrappers littering the ground around a ride. That wouldn't be show ready. You're not going to find Cinderella smoking by the backstage door. That's not in character. So through this simple tiered approach, their standards flow directly from their vision. I love that. And that's what I'm seeing in contact centers that are consistently delivering great results. So in contact centers, and more specifically, you can have foundation and finesse criteria. And foundation standards measure whether something was done, be assessed with a simple yes or no. So did we go through the authentication process? Is that customer who they say they are? That's a yes or a no. Did we go through that properly? Did we code the contact correctly? That's a yes or a no. Easy, to define those and to measure those. Then finesse standards, we need some of those as well, or those things that are more subjective. So think of figure skating, the Olympics, or something like that. Did we listen? Did we provide options for customers when that's appropriate? There's no one yes or no, but there's more a matter of degrees. So in the most effective contact centers, I see a really clear mission. I see some simple high-level standards, and then I see criteria underneath each that really give us the means to know, are we doing what we need to do so that our brand shines through, so that we're connecting with our customers and serving them as and where we need to. And wow, that pays off long term. And it's a difference of night and day when you have a contact center that really dials in quality standards, and really, you can ask anyone what is quality. They can tell you what that means. They can tell you specifically what that means in their environment.
This is another interesting area where I feel like we're going through a bit of a shift in quality assurance QA these days, where not only, a few years ago, there were a lot of expensive add-ons to contact centers that would allow you to listen to a recorded call with a form in front of you and kind of grade it. But a lot of people that we worked with were doing that stuff manually in spreadsheets or something like that because they didn't want to pull the trigger on one of those. It's another area where I see the big cloud players are starting to just kind of pull that in and commoditize that as a part of their offering. But at the same stroke, that's the more manual side of QA. There's also this big rise of automated QA that we see starting to pop up, which I think not in the contact center space, more in the sales space. Gong really kind of led the charge and created a really viable and exciting and interesting product for this for salespeople. But now we're starting to see that stuff pop up in the contact center space as well. what are your thoughts on automated versus manual QA and how to marry those things, or does automated replace manual eventually? What are your kind of thoughts on the big shifts and trends that are happening there?
I like having both. I like, and I like correlating the two to see if they're giving, the same sort of read on how we're doing and where we're going. So the automated tools are so powerful. They can't decide what our brand is. They can't decide how our brand is going to be reflected best in our interactions. We've got to, it's like AI or anything. We've got to do some thinking and make sure these tools are reflecting what we need. But that said, I would have both. And if you reach a point where you're super comfortable with the automated side, you can maybe let go of some of that manual work that you're doing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think even with the power of the automated tools, which I think are phenomenal, I think there's such a value for sitting and listening to a couple calls a week, start to finish, for any team lead, supervisor, leader in the contact center. I think there's such a value in just having a bit of a thumb on the pulse of what do these calls sound like? What is the makeup of them? And the automated tools typically provide much more aggregated data around that. And that's really valuable and shows a lot of meaningful information. By no means do I think this is a one versus the other, but there's a deep importance to just being in touch with what it is like to be a customer and an agent. And the best way to do that is just listen to some calls and hear them from tip to tail and kind of get a feeling for what's happening there.
Yeah, I agree. And Peter, every leader who I've had the privilege of working with across the years, who really gets customer service, they carve out time to do just that. I mean, they're out handling interactions. And they'll say, I'm not very good at it. My team's way better at this, but I need to sit down and actually do this. I need to experience. They'll work the counter. They're out there with their sleeves rolled up, digging in and helping. And wow, what a cultural reinforcement that is to their team. But they're learning. They say, oh, I've got all these tools, but not just what you just said. Nothing can replace just that actual observation, doing the work, knowing what that looks like and feels like.
For sure. I haven't thought about this in years, but my first job out of college was an inside sales rep, which is in a lot of ways a contact center, but people don't always think about it that way. But I was just dialing outbound campaigns for dollars. And I had a fantastic boss, someone who I credit a lot of my success to, Jason Claus, who he was the outside to my inside, but he had come up in the inside sales role. And I still remember him. He would carve out a couple hours a week, jump into an outbound dialing campaign and just keep himself fresh and coach me through what he was doing. And it was such a valuable insight to see, like, someone who was years down the road in their career and doing things that felt so much more meaningful than just getting hung up on 100 times a day. But he would just sit there and run through it. I think a lot of it was for my benefit, but I think he also got a lot out of himself. And I always appreciated it that he wasn't too good to still do the kind of work that I was doing. It was a great experience for me. So
that's great. You remember that to this day.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's as good a place as any to land. Brad, this has just been an illuminating session with you. We already knew that you knew what you were talking about, but now we've really experienced it firsthand, and just appreciate your expertise and wealth of knowledge, and just all the insight that you provided. There is a ton of stuff that we talked about in this today, and we've got additional resources and white papers and data dictionaries and all kinds of things coming along with this that'll be available. Brad, from my side, just thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'll give you the final word.
Well, Peter, such a privilege. Thank you. And, keep up the good work. The kinds of capabilities you and your team are bringing to bear, those are the kind of tools that we need to really understand these environments. And that opens up a world of possibilities. So real privilege to be with you. Thank you.
Right on. Thanks, Brad.